A comeback. My late blooming success in the world of Greek mythology. Chapter 61. Hephaestus's gaze was drawn to a solitary creation resting on the counter beside the divan. It was a stone slab, identical in appearance to the resonance stone he had just upgraded. However, its internal stellar circuit was dim and lifeless, filled with subtle fissures of law left behind by an energy conflict. A perfect vessel. A failed fugue. Where did this come from? Hephaestus didn't recall attempting to create any other resonance stones. We found it in your forge temple. Little Lihua was lying right there, and this was the only thing beside her. We thought it might be important, so we kept it here, Argus answered first. Instantly, the entire sequence of events played out in Hephaestus's mind. Lihua attempted to create a resonance stone but failed at the stage of the fugue, leading to the shattering of her divine soul. Yet, he still didn't understand why she would do this. However, now was not the time to investigate the reasons. Hephaestus took a deep breath and made the most logical and direct assessment. If her divine soul was depleted, then all he needed to do was replenish it. He mobilized his source divine soul, vast and boundless like an ocean of lava. He separated a wisp of the gentlest, purest divine soul energy, like a trickling stream, and cautiously attempted to inject it into Lihua's nearly dry divine soul core. However, the instant they made contact, an unprecedented, fiercely repulsive barrier violently rebounded the energy. When his own divine soul touched Lihua's faint residual consciousness, it did not merge. Instead, it acted like a powerful, aggressive outsider, attempting to override and occupy that unique domain belonging solely to Lihua. Hephaestus's expression changed abruptly. He immediately withdrew the connection of his divine soul. Hephaestus slowly rose. The hope that had just ignited in his eyes was replaced by a deeper, colder shadow. He understood. Without his knowledge, Lihua's divine soul was no longer the mere fire seed he had initially separated from himself. In the times since her birth, through her interaction with the world and her independent thought, this fire seed had taken on its own unique color. She possessed her own memories, her own preferences, her own secrets, forming an irreplicable, unique nature. She was a brand new, independent soul. This realization instantly filled Hephaestus's heart with the extreme pride unique to a creator. Immediately following, this pride was replaced by a deeper despair, one capable of drowning a god. If this was the case, how could Lihua's divine soul be replenished? Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Why replenish it? Since Lihua was a divine soul separated from him, even if he couldn't replenish it, he could simply separate a new one. There was no need to rack his brain trying to figure out how to top it up. Since her soul was damaged. Then, completely erase this damaged, independent soul. And then, inject a new, fire seed, one belonging to him and absolutely obedient. He would once again possess a perfect, powerful, faultless golden maidservant. He would once again possess the most efficient, flawlessly calculating super terminal. From a rational and practical perspective, this was even the choice that maximized his benefits. This thought, like the most venomous viper, surfaced in his mind, tempting him. The king in him calculated the gains and losses of this plan. Zero risk, maximum return. The craftsman in him scrutinized the perfect golden body, a flawless vessel that should not be hindered by a damaged core. By using this plan, he would lose nothing. Except Lihua. He didn't even need to lift a finger. He simply needed to wait quietly for that lapis lamp to burn itself out. Then, replace it with a new wick. And everything would return to normal. Hephaestus slowly lowered his head. He looked at the cold, flawless face on the divan, a face that had lost all its luster. Countless images flashed through his mind. He saw the moment she first opened her eyes and clumsily called out, "Father God," in a clear voice. He saw the illogical, yet lingering, "Come back soon," she had uttered when he left. He saw her cool fingers clutching the corner of his robe upon his return. He saw her adorable, slightly programmatically wronged expression when she tried to stop Hermes. As these images flashed by, the king's composure and the craftsman's rationality in Hephaestus's deep eyes were utterly consumed by a hotter, more primal fury, the wrath of a father. She is not a replaceable part. The declaration was like an axiom, the tone cold yet filled with profound emotion. Hephaestus appeared extraordinarily calm, yet his body began to tremble slightly. A terrifying divine might, like a tangible storm, erupted from him, sweeping through the entire room and even the volcano itself. The three towering cyclops were shaken, forced to retreat repeatedly before this divine might imbued with the wrath of a father. Their massive single eyes were filled with unprecedented fear and awe. Hephaestus slowly and incredibly gently lifted Lihua's cold body into his embrace. He tried to warm the fading light within her with his own body heat. I am sorry. He whispered softly, speaking both to her and to himself. I am sorry, Lihua. I was negligent. I failed to fulfill a father's duty. He slowly rose, cradling Lihua. His crippled, limping foot stood more steadily at that moment than it ever had before. He didn't know how to save her. But he knew he had to save her. No matter the cost. He needed help. He first thought of the records in the Scroll of Myths, but instantly recalled that the Scroll of Myths was not entirely trustworthy. So, who else might possess the supreme wisdom regarding the nature of the soul itself, knowledge that he currently lacked? Hephaestus's gaze pierced the volcano's dome, as if seeing the distant sky, where the solitary, lofty temple, constructed of moon-white rock and imbued with rationality and order, stood. He slowly extended his other hand and took out the upgraded resonance stone from his embrace. I never thought the first contact would be about something like this. Hephaestus muttered to himself, then poured his entire will into the stone. Athena. His voice held no more probing, no more scheming. There was only the purest, most urgent request, that of a father trying to save his daughter. I need your help. After parting ways with Hephaestus, the goddess of wisdom, Athena, returned to her temple. She sat on her throne, crafted from pure silver, devoid of any superfluous ornamentation. In her eyes, the entire world seemed like a vast and intricate chessboard. And tomorrow's celebration was a magnificent game of chess, soon to be played on that board, a game she and Hephaestus had jointly directed. Every step, every possible variable, was meticulously rehearsed countless times in her mind, as vast as the cosmos. Ultimately, all the rehearsals pointed to a perfect and undisputed victory. A faint, victorious curve graced the corner of her lips. Unbeknownst to her, at some point, the name Hephaestus had subtly moved from being an interesting variable on the edge of her chessboard to its very center. He was like a comet, defying all rules, with an unpredictable trajectory, rudely intruding into her unchanging celestial sphere, constructed of absolute order and rationality. He disrupted her rhythm, and even negated her plans. But he offered her a more interesting path, one she had never considered before. This made her feel a touch of offense, and a greater sense of novelty. Just as she was lost in this endless contemplation of the future, the resonating stone, which Hephaestus had personally upgraded and she had just accepted, suddenly began to flicker erratically with urgent, faint light, accompanied by a subtle tremor, on the small table beside her. Athena's gray eyes narrowed slightly. She extended a wisp of her divine consciousness into it. It was Hephaestus. She accepted the call. Athena. A voice emanated from the stone tablet, piercing the spatial barrier. The voice no longer held the composure and ease it had in the temple of Poseidon, nor the coldness and aloofness it had on the plain of Mykonos. Instead, it contained an urgency that was desperately suppressed yet still undeniable, and a profound solemnity. No pleasantries, no small talk. I need your help. Upon hearing this, Athena felt a fleeting surprise due to Hephaestus's completely different tone, but her voice remained as consistently calm and icy as ever. What is it? I created a life using a fragment of my soul. This wisp of divine soul formed a unique individual, distinct from my own divine soul. But this also means that if its divine soul is damaged, I cannot replenish it. I need you to tell me how to restore a damaged, independent soul. A long silence fell within the temple. Athena did not answer immediately. Her mind, at this moment, raced at an unprecedented speed. Every word in Hephaestus's statement was like a bomb dropped into her sea of thought, capable of detonating the entire ocean. Creating life. An independent, brand new soul. She and Prometheus had worked together to imbue clay figures with life. Yet Hephaestus, by his own power, had single-handedly accomplished both, shaping the form, and bestowing the spirit, two entirely different creative authorities. And now, this creation had a damaged divine soul and needed help. She instantly constructed a complete logical chain. Her ally, who had recently engaged in equal exchanges with her, and even subtly outsmarted her in cunning, now, for the first time, revealed his most fatal and undeniable vulnerability to her. And the source of this vulnerability was a miracle, something she could not imagine, filled with infinite research value. Her mind immediately constructed several solutions. The simplest was a slow nurturing method based on the principle of homologous resonance. Just like all the gods, as long as the divine soul is in a suitable environment, it can be replenished. Since it was a fragment of Hephaestus's soul, theoretically, as long as there were still pulsating flames in the volcanic kingdom, this wisp of divine soul could slowly recover. She only needed to inform Hephaestus of this method, and he could complete it independently. But this would also cause her to lose the opportunity to personally interact with, study, and even influence this miracle. She began to ponder. Should she propose conditions in exchange for greater benefits? Or should she offer another, more perfect method that only she could accomplish, thereby completely seizing the initiative? Just as she was caught in this brief, wise deliberation, Hephaestus's slightly hoarse voice came again. The voice had shed its urgency, leaving only a cold, all-knowing calm. Athena, you wouldn't have thought for so long before. I don't know if this matter is really that difficult. But I can tell you, the way you treat me determines the way I treat you. Now, the choice is yours. And I will only give you one chance. This ultimatum, like a cold bolt of lightning, cut through all considerations of gain. Athena's gray eyes suddenly sharpened. She understood. The other party had seen through her hesitation, seen through her calculations. What he wanted was not a cold, profit-maximizing, optimal solution. What he wanted was the truest attitude of her, his ally. This was not just a plea for help. It was also a qualification review. He was forcing her to make the most fundamental choice, to be a temporary consultant, who could be discarded at any time, or to be a core ally, who must be fully committed. An interesting test, Hephaestus. You're right, this matter is not without a solution. There is indeed a method that allows you to slowly nurture it yourself. But that would be like using a mortal's oil lamp to replenish the light and heat of a dying star. The process is long, and the outcome is full of variables. And I, her voice carried the absolute confidence of the goddess of wisdom, have a better way. Your creation is, in essence, an incredibly precise, mechanical construct, woven from divine power, possessing its own will. The damage to its divine soul is not simply due to exhaustion, but because after this, creation endured an impact beyond its capacity, its internal, divine patterns, became disordered, and its cornerstone of the soul collapsed. For this kind of damage, merely nurturing the divine soul is not very effective. What you need to do is not add fuel to the fire, but reforge it. Athena stood up, her gray eyes seemingly piercing the spatial barrier, seeing Re-Wall lying on the cold, soft couch deep within the volcano. I can enter the core of its divine soul. With my wisdom, I can reorder its chaotic soul imprints, and reconnect its broken threads of law. I can even guide it, teach it how to more stably and effectively wield the power that does not belong to it. I can revive it. As Athena's words fell, a long silence ensued on the other end of the resonating stone. She knew Hephaestus was weighing his options. Weighing the risk of allowing a god from Mount Olympus like her to enter the core of his creation's divine soul. Of course, Athena's voice sounded again, calmly stating her price: I never do good deeds for free. My wisdom comes at a cost. What do you want? Hephaestus's voice came through, without wariness in his tone, but with an invisible sense of pressure. He always seemed to give the choice to the other party, but the result was that the other party had no choice but to compromise. However, Athena also had absolute confidence. She was not worried that her services would not sell, so, I want it. Athena's voice was devoid of any emotion. Hephaestus's voice, like the sharpest scalpel, precisely cut through Athena's vague and oppressive demands. The it we are discussing now, the one that fits the description, seems to be singular. As the goddess of wisdom, your negotiating skills appear to be lacking. Or perhaps, the it you refer to has another meaning. Then you had best clarify. This almost offensive question did not provoke Athena's anger. On the contrary, the coldness of a sage in her gray eyes was, for the first time, replaced by a faint smile, almost bordering on admiration. Your perceptiveness exceeds my expectations, Hephaestus. She frankly admitted the trap in her words. Indeed, what I want is it. Her gaze seemed to penetrate the spatial barrier, falling upon that distant volcanic kingdom. That golden creation, brought into being by your own hands, possessing an independent soul. But what I desire is not to possess its shell. I want the right to converse with it at any time. Athena's gaze returned to its usual calm and rationality. It is an unprecedented miracle, a sentient being, with an independent will, constructed from pure skill and laws. I wish to personally guide it, observe it, and study its growth. I want to teach it all the wisdom about the universe that I know. This is my price. Hephaestus's heart sank. This was a condition more gentle, yet more overbearing, than directly demanding Liwa. She didn't want ownership, but rather, the right to teach, and influence. Furthermore, Athena only mentioned teaching all wisdom about the universe. What she would actually teach, without supervision, he couldn't guarantee at all. All lessons must take place in my volcanic kingdom. Hephaestus stated his bottom line. It is not a creation, it should be she. To me, she is my daughter, not an experimental subject to be guided. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to ask you how to repair her divine soul. All teachings must be with my and her consent. After saying this, Hephaestus paused for a moment. I or she? Naturally. Athena nodded, accepting the additional clause, a broader smile gracing her lips. She had found a weakness in this seemingly cold and ruthless blacksmith. The deal is struck. She looked at Hephaestus, her tone regaining that unquestionable command. Without further ado, I shall depart now. Not now. Hephaestus shook his head. Athena's brows furrowed again. Why? I do not wish for any deity to know that Athena, the goddess of wisdom, once set foot in my volcanic kingdom for my private affairs. Hephaestus explained, a strategist's calmness glinting in his eyes. This would invite unnecessary scrutiny from the king of gods. I need Hermes to use his realm walker to open a corridor of silence for your journey, completely erasing all your traces. Athena understood. This was the most secure and cautious plan. A very thorough consideration. Athena expressed her approval. Hephaestus further injected his divine sense into the resonance stone, activating the brand new star network. While maintaining contact with Athena, he initiated a call to the two nodes representing Hermes in the network. This would be the Star Net's first three-party conference. It seems it wasn't successful. The clear, cold voice of the goddess of wisdom sounded again. The node representing Hermes was dead silent. There was no response. Hephaestus's gaze narrowed slightly. He increased the output of his divine power. The other end of the network remained in impenetrable, absolute isolation of laws. It seems our chief messenger, Hephaestus withdrew his divine sense, a hint of helplessness in his tone, has once again gone to that remote area, where the signal cannot reach. The underworld. Athena instantly made a guess. Also, what is a signal? Athena showed curiosity towards the strange word in Hephaestus's speech. A term representing the medium that enables our communication. To be precise, it's the connection between stars, so it can also be called a star mark. Athena frowned slightly, not entirely satisfied with Hephaestus's explanation. In any case, Hephaestus paid no mind to whether his explanation was sufficient, his tone unwavering. Before you find a suitable way to travel, you must first tell me the nurturing method you mentioned. I must first ensure, in the most secure way, that her divine soul does not completely dissipate during this waiting period. This is a prerequisite for the transaction. A complex emotion flickered in Athena's gray eyes. A stream of information, filled with ancient wisdom and the laws of life, emerged from her fingertips and slowly passed through the resonance stone to Hephaestus. It's perfectly reasonable for the divine realm's Dingtok to transfer files, isn't it? Underworld, Hades' great hall. Unlike Poseidon's sea god's palace, which was filled with primitive and wild auras. Hades' great hall, on the other hand, presented a diametrically opposite beauty, filled with absolute order and eternal stillness. The floor, paved with the purest soul crystals condensed from the size of countless departed souls, was smooth as a mirror, reflecting the eternal night sky of the hall's ceiling, constructed from Stygian obsidian, devoid of stars. The figure of the divine messenger Hermes now stood respectfully in the center of the great hall. This time, he had not snuck in. Instead, he held the scepter of the King of Gods, representing the will of the King of Gods, and, as the Olympian divine messenger, had come to convey the supreme divine oracle. Upon the throne, Hades, the king of the underworld, still wore his unchanging, pale yet handsome countenance. Speak. His cold voice echoed through the hall. What new, boring idea has my brother, who resides in the heavens, come up with now? Hermes bowed slightly, his voice resonant and solemn. Great king of the underworld, Zeus, king of the gods, has entrusted me to convey his highest respects to you. And to inform you that the Father God is concerned about the anomalies in the Tartarus abyss and the growing anger of the Mother Goddess Gaia. To ensure the stability of the three realms, the Father God has decided. Hermes paused, then uttered the divine oracle that was enough to shake the entire underworld. He will personally visit your kingdom in the coming days. To inspect the seal of Tartarus. Hephaestus's divine consciousness slowly withdrew from the stream of information, which was brimming with ancient wisdom and the laws of life. Athena's voice, from the other end of the resonance stone, delivered the final, cold diagnosis. This is the method of nurturing. It was the only way to preserve her divine soul before I could arrive. At this point, I have no other means left. The rest depends on you, and on her destiny. The stellar connection was severed there. Hephaestus stood still, silent for a long time. He slowly turned around and looked at the three giants, who stood like mountains, filled with anxiety and helplessness. You all may leave. His voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable weariness. My lord. Brontes wanted to say something more, but Argus stopped him with a look. They could sense that their king, at this moment, needed no one's help. Rather, he needed a space of absolute quietness, belonging only to him and the child. The three giants quietly withdrew from Lihua's room. Inside the spacious room, only Hephaestus remained, along with the cold, golden life form on the couch whose aura was faint. Athena's solution slowly flowed through his mind. It was not a specific, repair, procedure. Rather, it was the construction of an environment. Theoretically, it was the perfect nursery, most suited for an independent soul to undergo self-repair. Hephaestus walked to the couch and knelt down on one knee again. He did not immediately begin. He simply watched Lihua's face, which had lost all its brilliance. He understood that Athena's plan pointed the direction but did not provide the specific path. And that one path capable of saving Lihua could only be paved by him, and by him alone. The nurturing of a divine soul requires an environment that matches its characteristics, and Hephaestus knew that Lihua's soul was already different from his own. His divine soul was the volcano, the lava, the violent primal power capable of incinerating all things. In such an environment, he thrived. But Lihua was different. While her divine soul was indeed the spark he had separated, that spark had long since evolved into an entirely new form after its birth. It was the fire of order, the fire of logic, the flame of civilization yearning for the pure beauty inherent in wisdom and creation itself. Placing her within violent primal flames would not be nurturing. It would be destruction. Hephaestus needed to construct a home for Lihua. A perfect hothouse filled with absolute order and pure creation. Hephaestus knew that the process of creation itself could generate such an environment. But he felt it wasn't enough. He wanted the forge to craft creations that inherently carried the power of order and creation, using the birth of these artifacts to ensure the environment possessed the highest concentration of laws. He began to ponder what kind of creation could simultaneously represent order and creation. Was it instruments like the ruler and compass, symbolizing measurement and order? Or tools like the hammer and chisel, symbolizing shaping and creation? Was it the craft of weaving, which transforms disordered threads into ordered fabric? Or the art of painting, which transforms non-existent imagination into tangible existence? Countless thoughts flashed through the sea of his divine soul, only to be rejected one by one. Until finally, the simplest, purest concept, yet one containing infinite possibilities, emerged in his mind. Building blocks. Yes, building blocks. The most fundamental unit, each one a perfect embodiment of order, and their infinite combinations, the most primal expression of creation. This was not just an object, it was a tangible philosophy, the physical embodiment of the modularization concept he had once explained to Athena. More importantly, it was the most perfect toy, prepared for a shattered soul that needed to relearn how to construct itself starting from the most fundamental laws. Hephaestus slowly rose. His eyes, slightly dimmed by exhaustion, were reignited at that moment by an undeniable flame, the fire of a creator. Carefully, he cradled Lihua's cold body from the couch. His movements were so gentle, as if he feared disturbing a snowflake about to dissipate. Holding her, he walked step by step out of the room and toward the massive core control room, which had fallen silent. He did not place her on the cold stone platform. Instead, he walked to the throne, the symbol of the king of the volcano, crafted from obsidian and lava, and gently settled her onto his own wide, warm seat. Then, he turned and walked to the enormous main control screen, which had lost all its light. He reached out and slowly placed his palm against the cold core of the screen. His action was deep and solemn, like the god of creation issuing a command with the highest authority to the forge of destiny. The great power belonging to the god of the forge spread throughout the entire volcano kingdom. Rumble. The silent volcanic realm began to beat again. But this heartbeat was completely different from before. The siphon pipes buried deep within the Earth's core began drawing out Typhon's wrath, but the extraction speed was controlled by Hephaestus at an incredibly stable threshold. The energy purification array began operating at a power level far exceeding the usual, repeatedly sorting, filtering, and refining every wisp of violent energy until it transformed into the most docile and purest source of creation. Immediately afterward, all production lines received a brand new production sequence command from the highest authority. They no longer forged weapons, they no longer manufactured tools. On production line 1, the purest crystal raw materials were fed in. After millimeter-level precision cutting and polishing, they transformed into translucent, absolutely symmetrical pieces possessing the perfect golden ratio, the cornerstones of order. On production line 2, countless ores were smelted and condensed in invisible molds into blocks that could be perfectly joined by mortise and tenon, assembling into any tool shape, the creation units. Production line 3. Production line 4, countless materials, varying in form, were forged, processed, and combined, ultimately forming building blocks that adhered to the same underlying logic, being continuously created. The entire forge of destiny was no longer a war factory prioritizing efficiency. It had transformed into a massive nursery, brimming with boundless creativity. Streams of refined energy, saturated with the laws of order and creation, slowly radiated from these combinable and assemblable building blocks. Warm and gentle, like the first ray of morning light in spring, they gathered toward the supreme throne. Then, like the gentlest sheer veil, they softly enveloped Lihua's cold body, silently seeping into the core of her divine soul that was about to extinguish. Hephaestus did not leave. He stood in the center of this symphony composed of creation, like the sole conductor. He used his entire divine consciousness to maintain this absolute balance and guard this movement played only for one person. Time lost its meaning in that moment. After an unknown amount of time passed, Hephaestus saw Lihua's tightly closed, dim golden eyelashes tremble slightly. A wisp of light, so faint it was almost imperceptible, flashed between her eyelashes. He reached out and gently grasped her fingers, which were still cold. He felt a faint, ethereal warmth slowly radiating from the golden forged palm. A weary, relieved smile finally appeared on Hephaestus's face, which was slightly pale from the depletion of his divine power. Sleep now, Lihua. His voice was as soft as a sigh. Father God is here. Underworld, palace of Hades. Silence was the eternal melody here. Hermes, the divine messenger, still stood respectfully in the center of the grand hall. He had just finished delivering the oracle, a message that was enough to shake the three realms. Upon the throne, Hades, the lord of the underworld, showed no expression on his pale and handsome face. But Hermes could clearly feel the law of death in the surrounding air becoming increasingly viscous and heavy. That was the silent, icy anger of the monarch. Inspection. After a long pause, Hades slowly spoke, uttering the word with a hint of sarcasm. Does my brother, who resides high in the heavens, believe that the order of my underworld is not perfect enough? Or does he think that Tartarus, which I personally oversee, might have some oversight that he didn't anticipate? Hermes bowed slightly, his voice neither servile nor arrogant. Father God has no such intention, great king of the underworld. Father God is only concerned that the wrath of Gaia, the mother goddess, might affect the stability of the seal. This visit is more of a fraternal visit and a reaffirmation of the covenant. Visit. A cold, humorless curve appeared at the corner of Hades's lips. I don't recall us having such a warm relationship. He slowly rose from the throne. Go back and tell my arrogant brother. He may come to my underworld, after I agree. However, his voice, like a chilling wind from the depths of the nine nether, instantly froze all of Hermes's polite words. Please also remind him. Some things that have slept for too long are best left undisturbed. Otherwise, when the abyss gazes into the sky, even the king of gods will fall from his nightmare. Mount Olympus, temple of wisdom. As night fell upon the mortal world, the magnificent palace on Mount Olympus was also bathed in starlight and moonlight. Athena sat by the window, gazing at the stars, a trace of unease in her heart that she had never felt before. That peculiar creation with a unique divine soul might completely vanish tonight. And she hadn't even had a chance to see it. She had finally managed to secure the right to teach, yet she might never even meet her student. She couldn't accept that. But she also couldn't let other gods know about her secret relationship with Hephaestus. So, before resting, she made one last attempt to use the resonance stone to call out to Hermes, who was somewhere unknown. The gaps between the three realms. Having just escaped the suffocating law suppression of the underworld, Hermes's figure appeared in a chaotic spatial turbulence. He was about to activate Realm Walker to return to Olympus and report. Just then, the resonance stone terminal, exclusive to the star network, in his embrace vibrated urgently. He probed with his divine sense and found that the caller was none other than Athena, the goddess of wisdom. What is it, Your Highness? Hermes put away his usual cunning, his tone returning to the solemnity befitting a divine messenger. I need to go to Mount Etna immediately. Athena's voice was still clear and cold, but it carried an undeniable, illogical urgency. It concerns the survival of a unique soul. I need you to use the corridor of silence to open a passage for me that will not be detected by any being. Hermes's heart tightened sharply upon hearing this. The survival of a unique soul. A volcano. He instantly connected everything, realizing that his ally might be facing a crisis. I understand. He didn't hesitate, nor did he ask another question. Please wait in the temple, I will be there immediately. Mortal realm, under the night sky. The land was in darkness. Ever since the king of gods had withdrawn the flames, the mortal world had returned to coldness and ignorance. A tall figure walked across this land abandoned by the gods. Prometheus, the Titan god. He had just inspected the human children huddled in cold caves, trembling from hunger and cold. Their eyes, devoid of the curiosity and brilliance of birth, now only held fear of the darkness and numbness to survival. If this continued, they would all perish before the first winter arrived. Prometheus's eyes, which could see the future, gazed towards the distant horizon. In that endless darkness, only one place emitted a faint, yet stubbornly persistent, dark red glow, like a distant star. Mount Etna. This sign indicated that there, according to the laws, was the only hope. Prometheus no longer hesitated, taking firm steps towards the only source of light in the darkness. He was not going to steal. He was going to plead. For his children, he was even willing to abandon the pride of a titan and offer his knee to a new god of Olympus. Above the sky. In stark contrast to the darkness of the earth was the eternal radiance above the sky. Two streaks of light, one gold and one silver, like parallel sun and moon, streaked across the night sky. It was Apollo, the god of light, and Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Some time had passed since they had entrusted the undying true flame and the eternal moon essence to Hephaestus. During this time, the reputation of the volcano kingdom had resounded throughout the three realms with the game against Poseidon promoted by Hermes after leaving Poseidon's palace, which also drew Zeus's attention, leading him to send Hermes to the underworld. This astonished the two deities, but also gave rise to a hint of impatience. That craftsman certainly has a lot of leisure to direct a celebration. Apollo's voice carried a touch of an artist's unique dissatisfaction at the delay of his commission. I'm more concerned with what masterpiece he forged using my undying true flame. His conflict with Poseidon is over. Artemis's voice remained cold and concise. It's time for him to fulfill his promise to us. The two divine lights did not linger, descending directly towards the volcano, which still emitted a scorching aura in the dark night. Mount Etna, core control room. Here, there was no distinction between day and night. The suppressed roar of the Destiny Forge, at its lowest power, was like a steady heartbeat, providing eternal, gentle light and heat to this space. Hephaestus still sat beside the throne, his entire mind immersed in the silent symphony of creation before him. On the assembly line, building blocks, crafted from different divine materials were continuously produced. The energy they emitted, filled with the laws of order and creation, flowed like gentle streams, slowly converging into the golden body on the throne. Li Hua's tightly closed eyes seemed to relax a little. Her cold body also seemed to have a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. Hephaestus was completely absorbed, oblivious to everything outside. He didn't know. At this very moment, his volcano kingdom, this secluded paradise he had built with his own hands, had become the focal point of countless contradictions and desires in the entire mythological world. Three distinct wills were converging here simultaneously from three different dimensions. One was the traitor, from the sky, full of pride and expectation. One was the supplicant, from the earth, full of compassion and determination. And another, under the protection of the corridor of silence, had silently penetrated all defenses and appeared directly behind him, the reviewer. The moment the first golden ray of light, not belonging to the volcano but to the sun, illuminated a corner of the control room through a crack in the dome. Hephaestus's constantly tense divine sense suddenly jolted. He had finally noticed. A wisp of golden light, not of the volcano but of the sun, pierced through a crack in the dome, illuminating a corner of the control room. Hephaestus's divine consciousness, which had been immersed in the symphony of creation, suddenly twitched like a plucked string. His first reaction was not enemy attack, but an unaccustomed bewilderment. Why didn't Li Hua give a warning? This thought had just arisen when it solidified. He turned his head, looking at the golden figure lying quietly on the throne, and an indescribable sense of loss and emptiness instantly gripped his heart. It turned out that the clear and calm voice, which always reported everything to him from behind him, was now in the deepest slumber. She could no longer remind him. He could only rely on himself. Hephaestus retracted his gaze, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a cold solemnity. He did not interrupt his control over the Forge of Destiny. His divine consciousness, like two divided streams, one still maintained the gentle symphony of creation played for Li Hua, while the other transformed into the cold majesty of the king of the volcano, facing the two uninvited guests. Lord Apollo, Lady Artemis. His voice echoed in the spacious control room, calm, yet with a subtle hint of detachment. Your grand arrival seems to lack some courtesy. Two divine lights, one gold and one silver, slowly condensed into form. Apollo, the god of light, held his lyre, a hint of an artist's anticipation for his work on his handsome face. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, carried her plain old bow, her cool gaze immediately falling upon the throne behind Hephaestus, seemingly showing a limited curiosity towards the sleeping golden being. Your realm, indeed, has a unique charm. Apollo's voice was the first to sound, as he surveyed the building blocks, constantly being born on the assembly lines, filled with aesthetic order, a subtle hint of mockery in his golden eyes. It seems that after resolving your dispute with Poseidon, you have ample leisure to delve into these useless, children's toys. Since you already have this leisure, he changed the subject, a fiery glint in his golden eyes, then, shouldn't it be time to deliver my sisters and my divine bows? Hephaestus's heart sank slightly. He could feel that to maintain Li Hua's nurturing environment, he had at least diverted more than half of his attention. At this moment, he was in an unprecedented state of weakness. And these two main gods clearly had no intention of being considerate of his predicament. He looked at the two deities, about to speak, intending to use a reasonable excuse to slightly delay the delivery of the divine bows. He couldn't directly say there was a problem with the weapons, that would damage his reputation. Nor could he expose the existence of and the code. He had to concoct a perfect reason, such as, the laws of the two top divine materials produced a slight unstable rejection reaction during their final fusion, requiring time for final harmonization. However, just as he was organizing his words, a completely different divine power, filled with compassion, resolve, and the aura of ancient earth, appeared at the entrance of the volcanic realm. That divine power was not hidden in the slightest, nor did it carry any hostility. It simply stopped there quietly, like the most devout pilgrim, awaiting an audience with its master. Apollo's and Artemis's expressions simultaneously changed slightly. This aura. Apollo frowned. Is it Iapetus's son? Prometheus. A hint of surprise also flashed in Artemis's cool eyes. What is he doing here? This sinner, who had just angered the king of gods and been stripped of all glory, dared to appear in the realm of another Olympian deity. Before they could ponder further, the tall figure had slowly emerged from the shadows of the entrance. He did not look at Apollo, nor did he look at Artemis. His eyes, which had foreseen the future and were filled with endless compassion, were fixed solely on Hephaestus. Then, under the incredulous gaze of the two Olympian main gods, this proud seer, who flowed with the blood of the most ancient titans, and who would rather be eternally imprisoned by the king of gods than submit. Slowly, he knelt on one knee. Bearer of flame. His voice was hoarse, yet carried a heavy power capable of shaking mountains. I, Prometheus, for my children who are about to be swallowed by darkness and cold, offer to you all my respect and plea. Please, bestow upon humanity once more the tireless power of fire. For this, I am willing to pay any price. The entire core control room fell into a dead silence. The impatience on Apollo's face turned into pure shock. For the first time, Artemis's perpetually icy face, though it had been changing recently, showed clear emotion. Hephaestus silently watched the scene before him. One was a high and mighty creditor, rightfully demanding his due goods. The other was a supplicant, humbled to the dust, willing to abandon all his dignity for the survival of others. The two formed the most striking and ironic contrast. And he was caught in the center of this storm of divinity and humanity, unable to move. Half of his mind was sustaining his daughter's life. The other half of his mind had to find a single path, capable of preserving everything, in this sudden Shira field filled with divinity, humanity, interests, and morality. However, fate seemed to think this drama was not chaotic enough. Just as the three parties confronted each other, and the atmosphere solidified to a freezing point, an undetected spatial ripple quietly spread in the most inconspicuous corner of the control room. The corridor of silence silently opened. Athena's and Hermes's figures stepped out from it. They had expected to be greeted by a secret, urgent meeting involving only the three of them and Hephaestus. However, what they saw was a Shira field filled with divine confrontation, which caught them completely off guard. Athena's gray eyes narrowed slightly the moment she saw Apollo and Artemis. When her gaze finally fell upon the Titan god kneeling outside the door, his aura tragic, even she, whose calm demeanor had been unchanging for millennia, though it had been changing recently, showed a genuine, undisguised astonishment. And Hermes, after seeing the luxurious lineup of what could be called godly combat, his smile once again completely froze. He subconsciously glanced at Athena beside him, then at his ally in the eye of the storm, who remained unfazed. His heart, that of the god of commerce, frantically sounded in alarm at this moment. He had a strong premonition. Today, he seemed to have stumbled into the beginning of an epic storm, one that could overturn the pattern of the three realms. Silence. It was the only language in this control room. 5 Olympian gods, 1 Titan god. 6 gazes, 6 wills, 6 distinct demands, collided and intertwined in this confined space, forming an invisible storm. And Hephaestus stood at the center of this storm. Half of his mind, like the gentlest silk thread, sustained the flickering soul fire on the throne. The other half of his mind transformed into absolute, unquestionable order, confronting the chaotic battlefield before him. Ultimately, it was he who broke the solidified silence. His gaze did not fall upon the humbly pleading Prometheus, nor upon his ally Athena, who had quietly joined the fray. He first looked at the most arrogant, most impatient, and most troublesome creditor in the room. Your Highness Apollo. His voice was calm, yet it instantly drew the attention of all the gods. I have finished forging the divine bows for you and Her Highness Artemis. These words, like a calming pill, somewhat soothed the artistic anxiety in Apollo's eyes. However, Hephaestus's tone shifted. I do not recommend that you take them now. Apollo's brow furrowed again. Why? Because an unprecedented opportunity lies before us. Hephaestus extended his hand, slowly sweeping over each god present. Please see, Your Highness. Here, there is me, and the Forge of Destiny behind me, which represents the pinnacle of forging craftsmanship in this era. Here, there is you, God of light and art. Your divinity can imbue the divine bow with the soul of light and truth. Here, there is Her Highness Artemis, goddess of the hunt and moon. Her will can infuse the divine bow with the instinct of stillness and precision. This, in itself, is already a perfect divine artifact. But now, his voice took on a hint of seductive power. We have more. We have Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Her wisdom can engrave intelligence into your light arrows, allowing them to discern all weaknesses and automatically find their path. We have Prometheus, the foreseer. His foresight can allow your arrows to predict all of the enemy's evasion trajectories even before they are shot. We even have Hermes, the divine messenger. He glanced at his bewildered ally, to imbue it with the divine speed of spatial traversal. Hephaestus withdrew his hand, calmly looking at Apollo, who was already in shock. So, Your Highness, do you want a perfect divine artifact? Or an unprecedented collection of craftsmanship that integrates 6 supreme authorities: forging, art, hunting, wisdom, foresight, and swiftness? Apollo fell silent. In his golden eyes, a flame called fanaticism burned. Hephaestus did not wait for his answer but turned to the tragic titan, still kneeling on the ground. Prometheus, I have heard your plea. The fire in my forge is the fire of creation, the fire of order, the spark of civilization. I can bestow it upon mortals, allowing them to have their first warm hearths in the cold night. But this is not enough. His gaze fell back on Apollo. Here, there is also Apollo, the sun god. Within him flows the fire of nature, the fire of wildness, the fire of life that nourishes all things. What would their future be like if mortals possessed not only the fire of creation from the forge but also the fire of wildness from the wilderness? Prometheus suddenly looked up, and for the first time, his compassionate eyes were filled with an incredible light called hope. Your Highness Apollo, if you are willing to share a wisp of the sun's brilliance to merge with my forge fire, what humanity will receive will no longer be ordinary flame, but a truly perfect, ever-burning fire of civilization, capable of ushering in a new era. Hephaestus then analyzed the benefits to Apollo. And you, in turn, will gain the eternal and most devout worship of the entire mortal race. Apollo's heart skipped a beat. Finally, Hephaestus slightly turned, revealing the scene on the throne behind him to all the gods without reservation. That was Li Hua, a perfect golden life, lying quietly, stripped of all its radiance. Apollo's brow furrowed slightly, a hint of confusion flashing in his eyes. In Artemis's cool gaze, her limited curiosity grew more intense. Prometheus's compassionate eyes, upon seeing Li Hua, showed a complex empathy, shared by a fellow creator. And Athena's gray eyes instantly became incredibly deep, as if to thoroughly see through every law and structure within that golden creation. My daughter, Li Hua. At this moment, Hephaestus's voice shed all the majesty of a king and the pride of a craftsman, all the schemes, leaving only the purest, heaviest burden of a father. Her soul is dissipating. All the cooperation I just mentioned has a prerequisite. That is, my daughter must live. He stretched out his hand, pointing to the 3 gods present. Athena, I invited you here for the most precise soul surgery. Her soul's cornerstone has collapsed, and the divine patterns are chaotic. Only your wisdom can reorder those confused imprints for her. Then, his gaze turned to Prometheus, who was still kneeling on one knee. Prometheus, you shape the bodies of mortals. Your understanding of the structure of life is unparalleled. Although her body is golden, its internal life cycle also requires a top-tier doctor who understands the structure of life to stabilize it. Finally, his gaze fell upon the god of light holding the lyre. And Your Highness Apollo, Hephaestus's voice was neither humble nor arrogant. You wield the divine authority of healing, the ultimate guardian of the fire of life. Any reconstruction of soul and body requires your power to reignite the fading vitality. The three of you are the world's foremost experts in the field of life. I implore you, save my daughter. Hephaestus's words fell. The entire control room once again fell silent. But this time, it was no longer the silence of confrontation and conflict. Instead, it was a calm filled with deliberation and thought, as everyone was awestruck by the grand blueprint. Apollo and Artemis weighed the value between a perfect divine artifact and a legendary epic. Prometheus weighed the difference between a hope and a greater hope. Athena, meanwhile, weighed the glory of a research against that of personally participating in and leading a cross-domain miracle of creation. Hephaestus looked at them and slowly spoke his final concluding remarks. Lords, opportunity is at hand. We can continue this stalemate, letting everything remain stagnant. Or, we can join forces to accomplish this unprecedented collaboration. Then, my daughter will be reborn, mortals will regain light, and both your highnesses will wield legendary divine bows worthy of being recorded in history. The choice is entirely yours to make. After a long silence, the first to break the calm was Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Her gray eyes gazed deeply at Hephaestus, as if trying to see through this monster, who manipulated everyone in the palm of his hand. Finally, she slowly opened her mouth and uttered two words. Agreed. Athena's voice was like a decisive chess piece falling on a chaotic board. That simple, agreed, instantly broke the frozen stalemate. The second to respond was Prometheus, still kneeling on one knee. He slowly raised his head, his eyes, filled with endless compassion, for the first time, looked towards the sleeping golden being on the throne. His gaze carried a deep empathy and understanding, as a fellow creator. If the child in darkness can regain light. His voice was hoarse, yet incredibly firm. I am willing to offer all my skills and walk with you. Saying this, he slowly rose, no longer facing Hephaestus, but towards the throne, towards the life named Lihua, whom he had never met. Now, all the pressure converged on the last two deities in the arena who had yet to express their stance. Apollo's handsome face was filled with complex and intense struggle. Reason told him that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a legendary epic that would make him famous, beckoning to him. But emotionally, he was asked to cooperate with a sinner, who had just angered the king of gods, and even to help the creation of the lame blacksmith who had caused him great trouble. This made his pride as the god of the sun feel an unprecedented offense. My flame is sacred. He frowned, uttering an ambiguous sentence, trying to preserve his last bit of dignity. Every time it burns, it should be for glory, not. Is there any glory greater than creation, Apollo? This time, it was Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who spoke. Her cool gaze fell upon Apollo, as if seeing through all the turmoil in his heart. Haven't you always wanted to compose a symphony that could rival the first string note at the dawn of the universe? Now, the opportunity is at hand. A shattered soul, a shaper of life, a reconstructor of wisdom, an igniter of healing. The four of us, working together, will jointly play an unprecedented movement concerning life and soul. And you, Athena's voice carried a subtle hint of temptation, will be the unique principle who ignites the first note of this movement. Apollo's breath suddenly hitched. In his golden eyes, the last trace of hesitation was completely burned away by the uncontrollable fervor of an artist encountering the highest ideal. I agree. He uttered these two words with difficulty. Artemis, standing nearby, merely nodded faintly when she saw her brother make his decision, indicating that she would not hinder him. Half of Hephaestus's mind, like the strongest anchor, was still firmly locked on the symphony of creation maintaining Lihua's life. The other half was rapidly scrutinizing the luxurious team of experts he had personally assembled. He was well aware of what a tremendous risk it was to expose Lihua, his greatest secret and deepest vulnerability, without reservation to 3-4, counting Artemis, of the Olympian main gods. But there was no trace of regret in his heart. On the contrary, when Prometheus and Apollo also joined this treatment plan, his heart, which had been anxious after seeking Athena's help, felt half relieved. Before, it was just Athena. He couldn't be sure whether this unfathomable goddess of wisdom would leave any unknown backdoors or marks after entering the core of Lihua's divine soul. That was a one-on-one gamble with completely asymmetrical information. Now, three top deities were participating together. Athena was responsible for the soul, Prometheus for the body, and Apollo for life force. The three specialized in their respective fields, yet they were interconnected and interdependent. Any deity attempting to make any abnormal move beyond the scope of treatment during the process would not be able to escape the eyes of the other two experts of the same level from different fields. A subtle separation of powers was formed between them, with mutual supervision and checks and balances. Even with specialized skills, the risk was significantly reduced compared to the beginning. One cannot give up striving for better conditions just because there is a possibility of failure. The environment is good. Athena spoke again. She had, at some point, arrived beside the throne. Her gray eyes were gazing intently at Lihua, as if admiring a perfect work of art. You used creation itself to construct the nursery and order to summon her dormant will. This direction is entirely correct. She affirmed Hephaestus's previous actions without hesitation. It is precisely because of your continuous summoning that, although her soul's foundation collapsed, the most crucial spark did not completely extinguish. This preserves the most important foundation for our upcoming reforging. After speaking, Athena turned to Hephaestus, her gray eyes filled with unprecedented solemnity. I'm going to begin. Hephaestus slowly nodded, and he proactively withdrew a sliver of his protective energy that enveloped Lihua, creating a gap. Athena extended a slender finger and gently touched Lihua's cold forehead. She closed her eyes, fully immersing herself in the task. Buzz. An invisible will, filled with absolute rationality, instantly entered Lihua's chaotic and shattered sea of divine soul. In Athena's perception, it was a collapsed golden palace, filled with countless garbled codes and erroneous logic. Her task was to use her wisdom as a blueprint to restore every brick and stone of this palace to its proper place. Just as Athena was performing the most precise soul surgery, Prometheus slowly rose and came to the other side of the throne. He did not probe Lihua's divine soul, that was not his domain. His compassionate eyes simply focused on scrutinizing Lihua's perfect golden body. Hephaestus, he suddenly spoke, his voice steady. Although I don't understand the mysteries of the soul, I have created the flesh and blood bodies of mortals. Any soul needs a sufficiently efficient container to draw energy from the outside world and maintain its existence. Humans need to eat, and your creation, her body, structurally, still has room for improvement. Prometheus stretched out his hand and used divine power in the air to outline the energy circulation diagram inside Lihua's body. He pointed to several slightly stagnant nodes. Here, the energy transfer paths here prioritize stability too much, sacrificing efficiency. You can try to replace the original, straight line, structure with a spiral structure to create more tiny energy vortices. This will increase her efficiency in absorbing energy from the environment you constructed by at least 30%. A glint flashed in Hephaestus's eyes. He immediately understood. These were two completely different philosophies of creation. He pursued industrial, absolutely precise, standardization. Prometheus, the creator of life, pursued the ecologicalization, full of curves and changes found in nature. I understand. Without hesitation, Hephaestus immediately split off a wisp of divine consciousness, manipulating the forge of destiny, and silently injected a pure, liquid, heart of activation, material into Lihua's body, beginning a silent upgrade and transformation of her internal energy circuits, and in the center of all this, Apollo, the god of light, slowly raised the lyre in his hand. He said nothing. But when Athena's reforging entered a critical stage, and when Hephaestus's transformation began to operate, his golden eyes would instantly light up. His slender fingers would gently pluck the strings. Jung. A warm, golden note, filled with the laws of life and healing, would fly from the strings and precisely merge into Lihua's divine soul core. That note precisely maintained her most basic life rhythm, smoothing out the law fluctuations caused by each soul reorganization and body modification, providing absolute stability and vitality for this delicate surgery performed on a knife's edge. Wisdom, life, healing, forging. Four vastly different supreme authorities, at this moment, for the same goal, perfectly merged together. In this tense yet orderly, expert consultation, not all deities participated. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, quietly leaned against a distant pillar. Her cool gaze was not on the thrilling treatment, but on the Titan god who was fully focused, guiding Hephaestus. She seemed to see a hint of herself, when guarding wild creatures, in that lonely figure who sacrificed everything for her child. Hermes, meanwhile, had quietly retreated to the furthest corner. He leaned against the wall, the smile on his face long gone, replaced by a complex expression mixed with shock, fervor, and deep calculation. He looked at the scene before him. The god of craftsmen, the goddess of wisdom, the foresight titan, the god of light. Four beings, each having reached the pinnacle in their respective fields, were now engaged in an unprecedented, perfect collaboration spanning across divine systems and factions, for a common goal. His heart, as the god of commerce, was frantically telling him. A new community of interest, centered around the volcanic nation and capable of changing the three realms, was taking shape right before his eyes. The prototype had emerged, after an unknown period of time. When Athena reopened her eyes, a fine bead of sweat on her forehead, her gray eyes showed a trace of fatigue, and, more, the excitement of a wise person who had solved an epical problem. The soul's foundation has been reforged. Prometheus also withdrew his gaze and let out a long breath. Life circulation has reached its optimal state. Finally, Apollo's lyre music slowly played its last healing note. Her vitality is unprecedentedly stable. The diagnoses of the three experts declared the surgery a success. Hephaestus slowly walked forward. He saw that Lihua's cold face on the throne had regained the warm luster appropriate for gold. Her tightly closed eyelashes were gently and rhythmically fluttering like butterfly wings. As if in the next second, she would awaken from a long slumber. Upon the throne, the golden, butterfly-like eyelashes finally, slowly, completely lifted. A pair of eyes, purer than a newborn star and warmer than molten gold, once again reflected the world's appearance. Her vision was no longer the world composed of cold data streams from the past. A new color and temperature, beyond logical description, filled her core of perception. She saw concern in the eyes of the three mountain-like giants. She saw admiration in the clear, gray eyes of the goddess of wisdom. She saw hope in the compassionate gaze of the Titan god. Finally, her gaze settled on the black-haired deity beside the throne, whose figure was tall and whose face bore a trace of exhausted relief. She saw love. Lihua slowly sat up from the throne. Every movement of her perfect, gold-forged body was filled with an unprecedented fluidity and harmony, a rhythm of life. She descended from the throne, barefoot, and walked step by step to Hephaestus. She did not speak. She simply extended her hands and gently embraced him. With her body, which had regained its warmth, she responded to his tireless symphony of creation, played for her alone. Father God. A soft call, devoid of any programmatic quality, sounded in his ear. I'm back. Hephaestus reached out and gently embraced her in return. I dreamed of lots and lots of building blocks. She continued to speak softly, her voice a gentle murmur of awakening. Athena watched the scene unfold, a flicker of ultimate satisfaction, befitting a wise one, in her gray eyes. Prometheus's face, usually etched with compassion, also revealed a genuine smile of relief, belonging to a creator. Apollo put away his lyre, his face showing the pride of an artist who had completed a masterpiece of the ages. Just then, the silent goddess of the hunt, Artemis, slowly stepped forward. For the first time, her clear eyes shed all aloofness, leaving only a pure solemnity, that of a guardian. I did not contribute to this healing. Updates are not easy, remember to share 101kanshu.com. Her voice was like the clear moonlight in the mountains. But, since I have witnessed this miracle here, then, I, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, hereby swear. She extended her hand, her fingertips tracing a silver rune in the void, symbolizing the lunar covenant. From today onwards, this child, Lihua, is also under my, Artemis's, protection. Any entity that attempts to harm her will face the endless pursuit of my moonlight arrows. This is my duty as a witness. Hephaestus heard this and looked at the solitary goddess, his eyes filled with sincere gratitude. He knew that Artemis was repaying the favor she felt she owed him in her own way. It was also her way of showing her highest goodwill to him, the future weapon forger. Then, Hephaestus composed himself and looked at Apollo and Prometheus. It's time for us to complete the latter half of this celebration. He turned, spreading his arms as if embracing his entire kingdom. The Forge of Destiny will play the final movement for us. Two divine bows, one gold and one silver, already forged, slowly flew from the sacred forge hall and hovered before the gods. This is merely a perfect shell. Hephaestus looked at Athena. Now, please bestow upon it wisdom. Athena nodded, separating a wisp of her purest divine wisdom, like a stellar logic chain, and fusing it into the bow's body. Hephaestus then looked at Prometheus. Please, bestow upon it foresight. Prometheus also extended his hand, and an invisible divine power, imbued with the trajectories of fate, flowed into it. Finally, Hephaestus's gaze fell on the eager divine messenger. Hermes, it's your turn. Please infuse it with swiftness that even the king of gods cannot capture. Hermes grinned, and a golden wisp of divine power, as if capable of traversing space, instantly wrapped around it. Hephaestus looked at the four distinct supreme authorities before him and extended his hands. The golden fire of creation perfectly integrated, wove, and imprinted all these powers. Buzz. The two divine bows erupted with unprecedented brilliant light. They were no longer mere artifacts. They were the crystallization of the collective will of six supreme deities, the highest embodiment of craftsmanship of this era. When the light of the divine bows subsided, Hephaestus did not stop. He turned to Prometheus, his expression becoming incredibly solemn. Now, it is our turn to bring light to the dark human world. He extended his hand, and a stable flame from the Forge of Destiny, filled with order and creation, ignited in his palm. He then looked at Apollo. The god of light understood, and he too extended his hand. A warm flame from the sun's core, filled with life and vitality, pulsed in his palm. Under the gaze of the gods, the two flames slowly approached, and finally, perfectly merged together. It was no longer mere light and heat. Within that flame, one could seemingly see the rise of city-states, the rolling of wheat fields, the cries of infants, and the contemplation of scholars. It was the unceasing flame of civilization, capable of ushering in an era. Hephaestus waved his hand, and a staff of inheritance, already prepared and crafted from centaur heartwood and activated heart, which would never wither, flew into Prometheus's hand. Prometheus trembled as he carefully guided the flame of civilization into the bud-like indentation at the staff's head. The flame burned steadily within it. This titan, who had sacrificed everything for his children, at this moment, raised the staff symbolizing hope, tears streaming down his face. He bowed deeply, his proud back bending, to Hephaestus and to all the gods present. When all was settled, the gods knew it was time to leave. Prometheus, carrying the flame, turned and strode away, heading towards the mortal realm with that hope capable of igniting a prairie fire. He was eager to bring this warmth back to his near-extinct children. Then, we should also take our leave. Apollo put away his divine bow, that pride belonging to the sun god, for the first time, replaced by a heartfelt recognition. Your labor fee will also be honored. Of course, the gates of the volcano are always open to you too, but please remember your manners. Hephaestus nodded in acknowledgement. Furthermore, within these two divine bows, I have left a contingency. I can destroy these weapons at any time. After you two fulfill your promises, I will remove this contingency. The twin gods' movements paused noticeably, their eyes filled with undisguised astonishment. Apologies, I'm not singling you two out. I do this with everyone. It's a habit of mine. Please understand, I still trust your highnesses. Apollo sighed, not arguing with Hephaestus. He had actually anticipated that this unfathomable craftsman would have such a trick up his sleeve. The twin gods said no more, took the finished divine bows, transformed into streaks of light, and vanished. Hephaestus's expression was normal, but in reality, after he finished forging, he had no energy to leave any contingencies. However, he didn't need to leave one, he just needed the twin gods to believe he had. Hermes walked over to Hephaestus, patted him on the shoulder, everything understood without words. He then departed as well, continuing his unfinished celebration announcement. Finally, only the goddess of wisdom, Athena, remained. She cast a deep glance at the golden life beside Hephaestus, then at Hephaestus himself. Take good care of her. Next time I teach, I hope to see a healthy student. With that, her figure also vanished from the spot. In the empty control room, only Hephaestus and Lehua remained once more. Hephaestus looked at the golden eyes beside him, now re-illuminated and filled with wisdom and the luster of life. The gloom in his heart, caused by I and the time rift, dissipated somewhat. No matter what the future held. At least for now, he had protected what was most important to him. And in the deepest part of his soul, the heavy, Olympian codex, stirred without wind. On the blank scroll of destiny, a new golden epic, more dazzling than any before, slowly emerged, word by word. As the last gilded character fell, Hephaestus felt his divine soul being drawn into a space within his soul. He saw with his own eyes the Olympian codex, suspended in the air. A sentence emerged from the codex: I am moved by your journey's accomplishments. I summon you now to resolve a doubt. However, I am currently constrained. Once this doubt is resolved, I must return to slumber. I only send a fragment of my soul to remain by your side. Resolve one of my doubts. Hephaestus looked at the appearing text, his heart filled with vigilance. How do I know if it's true or false? Constrained. Fragment of soul. He then noticed two other elements. It seemed the entity within the codex was an ancient deity who had been sealed, and the previous records and blueprints were provided by a fragment of their soul. The text on the codex did not change. It seemed genuinely unable to offer any other response. Anyway, asking is asking. Whether I believe it or not is my own judgment. Hephaestus made up his mind. And now, there were two questions he most wanted to know. One was, who exactly was I? The other was, why was the time in this world different from the records in the Mythology scroll? Considering that the difference in time would not directly affect his safety, Hephaestus decided to ask the first question. He posed the question that had always troubled him to the codex: who are you? The text on the codex dissipated, turning into several wisps of flowing light, seemingly an external manifestation of its thought process. Finally, a few words condensed in the air. After Hephaestus saw the answer, even as steady as he was, he felt incredible and astonished. I am Hephaestus. Thanks for watching.